Which is better, the Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G 2023 or the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra? Well, in this video, we're gonna find out. What's going on, everyone? This is Kevin here, and in this video, we're going to be comparing these two Stylus-equipped smartphones from Motorola and Samsung. Now, one thing I want to mention right from the beginning, of course, is that these two phones are very different in price. The Moto G Stylus 5G 2023 features an MSRP of just $399, whereas the Galaxy S23 Ultra features an MSRP of $1,199. So clearly, these phones are meant for different segments of the smartphone market. That being said though, I figured this would be a really interesting video to make it more clear on what features you're actually missing out on if you do want to save some money and go for the Moto G Stylus 5G 2023 compared to the S23 Ultra. Now, I will be leaving links in the video description to both of these devices where you can see the most up-to-date pricing and availability, but also keep in mind that if you do decide to buy these phones through a carrier, you most likely will be saving even more money. So definitely take a look at all your various options. Now, the first thing I want to discuss with these two phones are the displays. Now, the Moto G Stylus 5G 2023 features a 6.6-inch display compared to a 6.8-inch display with the Galaxy S23 Ultra. So the S23 Ultra clearly is the larger phone of the two, and you can see when holding the two phones side by side, it is a little bit bigger. However, since the bezels on the Samsung are smaller, they're actually somewhat similar in size. Now, the display technology that's being used here is very different. So with the Motorola, we're getting an IPS LCD display compared to a dynamic AMOLED 2X display with the Samsung. Now, both phones do feature 120Hz refresh rates though, which is appreciated. So you get nice, smooth movements around the operating system. Definitely very premium touch and something that Samsung has offered with their higher end phones for quite a while now. But it is cool to see that even though the G Stylus 5G 2023 is a lot more affordable, we're still getting that premium feature. Now, without a doubt though, when it comes to the brightness of the two displays, the Samsung wins. You can see that it's way brighter and way more vibrant, and one reason for that is because this display is AMOLED. So AMOLED does tend to have richer colors and better viewing angles and more brightness compared to an LCD display. The display resolution is also different between these two phones. So with the Motorola, we're getting a 1080p display with a PPI of 399 compared to the Samsung, where we're getting a 1440p display and a 500 PPI. And then the aspect ratios of these displays are a little bit different as well, with a 20:9 display with the Motorola and then a 19.3:9 display with the Samsung. And then overall, both of these phones do offer very thin bezels, and especially with the Samsung, but the screen to body ratio with the Motorola is 87.5% compared to 89.9% with the Samsung. So I do appreciate that both of these phones have very large displays, and then there's not a lot of bezel taking up extra space here. Overall, both of these phones have a very practical design to them. Now, with both of these devices, we do have hole punches for the front-facing cameras. You can see that with the Motorola, the hole punch is a little bit bigger, and it does feature a 16 megapixel front-facing camera compared to a 12 megapixel front-facing camera with the Samsung. And then when it comes to storage, both of these phones do offer 256 gigs of internal space. However, with the Motorola, we do get micro SD card expansion, which is nice if you want to offload photos and videos onto that SD card to free up some internal space. But then with the Samsung, there's no micro SD card expansion compatibility. So you are stuck with just 256 gigabytes. So when it comes to that, the Moto G Stylus 5G 2023 is actually a better option, because if you really want to maximize the amount of storage you have on your phone, then at least having SD card expansion really could come in handy for that. Now, with the Motorola, there's no wireless charging. However, with the Samsung, we do have wireless charging at 15 watts. So wireless charging is definitely a great feature to have, and with any device that does have it, I do tend to find myself using it quite a bit. I have wireless chargers all throughout my home. I have one in my kitchen, another in my bedroom, and then another in the office. So it's definitely really nice just to throw the phone down on that wireless charger, and it can be very convenient. Now, with the Moto G Stylus 5G 2023, we have a fingerprint sensor located on the power button. And it is very nice and fast and responsive. It works very well. And then with the S23 Ultra, the fingerprint sensor is built into the display. So that's also very fast and quick. And overall, of course, it's more modern and more impressive, I guess, to have the in-display fingerprint sensor. But I also don't mind the placement on the Motorola. So I would consider that to be a bit of a tie. Another cool thing too about these devices is that both of them do feature face unlock, so I do like that there are multiple methods for accessing the phones. Now taking a look at the rear camera setups on both phones, there are some similarities but also quite a few differences. So with the Moto G Stylus 5G 2023, we have a dual camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera and an 8 megapixel ultra wide angle camera. And then with the Samsung, we're getting a quad camera setup with a 200 megapixel main camera, a 12 megapixel ultra wide angle camera, a 10 megapixel 3x telephoto camera, and then a 10 megapixel 10x periscope telephoto camera. So a lot of different cameras here in the phone, and we're getting a lot of different functionalities. Of course, with this being a flagship device, we're getting top of the line cameras and features as well. So certainly when comparing these two phones, there's not really much of a comparison since you can pretty much do everything with the S23 Ultra. Also, when it comes to video recording with the rear cameras, it maxes out at 4K with the Motorola, whereas we can take 8K video at 30 FPS with the rear camera on the S23 Ultra. And then for the front-facing cameras, with the Motorola, you can do 1080p video, and then you can do 4K video at 60 FPS with the front camera on the Samsung. Now here's how things look on the camera apps on both devices. This is with the main rear camera right now. Then from here, we can go to the ultra-wide cameras, so you can fit a lot more content into a single frame. Definitely a big fan of that feature. And then there are no telephoto cameras, of course, with the Motorola, but then with the Samsung, we can do 3x, and this is an actual optical zoom, so keep that in mind. It's not just cropping in. And then there's also 10x as well, so you can really get close there. So 10x pretty much mimics having a macro camera. What's interesting is with the Motorola, there is no macro camera, but we do have a macro mode down here. So when you go to that, you can get very close up and have things be in really good detail, pretty much giving us that same macro effect. But then we're also getting that too with the S23 Ultra, being able to zoom in so closely there. We can also head over to portrait mode to get those nice blurred out backgrounds. So you can do portrait mode with both the rear camera and then flipping around, also with the front facing camera. So you can take portrait selfies, which is really cool. And then both phones do offer a group selfie functionality where you can zoom out a little bit. But I'm going to take a selfie image right now with both devices. And then there we go. And then with the Motorola. And then comparing the results right now, you can see there's quite a bit of a difference. So kind of zooming in on myself, you can see I'm a lot crisper and more clear here with the Samsung compared to the Motorola. So that's just one example of many to show you how much better quality you are getting with the cameras on the S23 Ultra compared to the G Stylus 5G 2023. Now getting into performance of these two devices, both phones have different amounts of RAM and different processors. However, they are both powered by Snapdragon. And in addition to that, both phones are compatible with 5G connectivity. So it's definitely really nice that you can use these phones with your favorite carrier's 5G network. But we have 6 gigabytes of RAM with the Motorola compared to 12 gigabytes of RAM with the Samsung. And then the Motorola has the Qualcomm Snapdragon 6 Gen 1 processor. And then with the Samsung, we have the Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 processor. So the Snapdragon 6 Gen 1 processor is actually brand new. This is the first phone I've used with that processor. And then every year from Snapdragon, we do get their top of the line processors. So the 8 Gen 2 is a flagship processor, of course, giving us pretty much some of the best performance out there, especially for an Android smartphone. Now I did run benchmark tests using Geekbench 6 with both devices, and you can see the differences in scores here. Clearly there's really no comparison. The S23 Ultra is significantly faster, and that does make a lot of sense. But what I recommend doing is running this test on your current device and then compare your scores to these scores to see how your current phone measures up. Because it is possible that both of these phones might be a lot faster than the phone you have now, or your current device might be somewhere in the middle. And then both of these phones do feature 5,000 milliamp hour internal batteries, and with the G Stylus 5G 2023, it maxes out at 20 watt fast charging, and then with the S23 Ultra, we have 45 watt fast charging. So you can definitely recharge this phone quite a bit faster compared to the Motorola. And then both phones do have NFC, so you can use them for tap and pay at your favorite retailer, that does support that at least. And then they both are running Android 13. We have on the G Stylus 5G 2023, Motorola's take on Android, which for the most part is stock Android with some modifications made and some extra features added. Overall, I'm a big fan of their approach when it comes to software, but then Samsung also is really good with their software too. Now, this phone features One UI 5.1, so it is pretty heavily modified from stock Android. However, if you've used a Samsung phone anytime recently, or really within the last 5 or 6 years, then things should seem pretty familiar to you here, as Samsung does a really nice job with their software and they do keep it consistent while adding in extra features as time goes on. And then another thing I want to mention too is that both phones do feature stereo audio. But I know the main reason why you're here, the main purpose of this video, and that's the fact that these two phones do have styluses. So we'll go over the differences and similarities right now, starting with the placement. So you can see that on the G Stylus 5G 2023, the stylus is on the right side, whereas on the S23 Ultra, the stylus is on the left side. Now, I do actually prefer the placement of the stylus on the Motorola. It does make a lot of sense because most people are right-handed, including myself, and you're going to be using a stylus with your right hand, so you'll be holding the phone with your left hand. So it's a lot more convenient having it on the right side because I'm holding the phone like this, then I just pop out the stylus and then begin using it. Whereas with the Samsung, it's not a huge deal, but if I'm holding the phone with my left hand and the stylus is over here, I kind of have to reach a little bit further over and it's a little more awkward, but then from there I can start using it. So like I said, that's really nitpicking, and of course if you are left-handed, I suppose Samsung's approach would be ideal for you, but just kind of take that into account. But you probably noticed that when you remove the styluses on both phones, you immediately get this pop-up here with a lot of different options. Now what's cool is you can customize that, so you can put your favorite apps there. And in the Play Store, there's a lot of apps designed for styluses, so you can download those and add them in here as well if you wish. But definitely nowadays, with how people have to sign a lot of documents and everything digitally, it is great to have a phone with a built-in stylus. It's also nice to use these just to navigate around the device, and if you want to draw or write notes, it's excellent for that too. But comparing these two styluses side by side, clearly with Samsung, it's a lot more sophisticated. For example, you can kind of hover over the display and it has like a little cursor. So that's kind of interesting. You don't get that here with the Motorola. And then the Motorola stylus is a bit more slim in comparison, but then with the Samsung, you do get an extra button here. So certainly with the S23 Ultra's approach with the stylus, this is more of a top of the line kind of feature to have. This is about as good as it's going to get with a smartphone with a built-in stylus, whereas the G Stylus 5G 2023's approach is definitely less sophisticated. But that makes sense since this phone is a lot more affordable. But if you do want to do a drawing or write a note or something like that, it does work really well in both phones. And even though the Moto G Stylus 5G 2023 is not as advanced, it still is nice and responsive here. And if you want to, you can use the stylus to navigate around the device, just like you would with your finger, for example. But then we'll go over to the Samsung right now and kind of do the same thing. So we'll create a note there. And then you can draw just like that. Definitely a little bit more precise with the Samsung, of course, but at the same time, the Motorola is still really good in comparison. But then you can get out of here, you can use the stylus to navigate around the phone. So again, it is a very nice feature to have. And what's also great about the styluses with both of these devices is that if you don't want to use the stylus, you can neatly just tuck it away and kind of forget about it. And then when you do need it, it is there conveniently for you. Now taking a closer look at the hardware of these two phones, both phones do look really nice. However, the build materials on the Samsung are a lot more premium. For example, with the Samsung, we're getting metal side rails and then glass on the back, whereas the G Stylus from Motorola is covered completely in plastic, besides the display being made of glass. So you can see on the left side of both phones, we have nothing on the Samsung, but then on the Motorola, we have the slot for the micro SD card and SIM card. Then on the right side, we have volume up, volume down, and then also the power buttons on both devices, whereas on the Motorola, the power button does double as the fingerprint sensor. Then up top here, on both devices, we have the noise canceling microphone. And then on the bottom, both phones have the stylus, microphone, USB-C port for charging and data transfer. With the Samsung, we have the SIM card slot. And then as a bonus, with the Motorola, we do have a 3.5mm headphone jack. So there is no headphone jack here in the Samsung, so if you do want to use wired headphones, you are going to have to use an adapter. And then taking a look at the back of both phones, I think both do look really nice. We have the camera module there, flash, and then the logos for the two companies. And I really like how on both phones, it's not a glossy back, it's a matte finish, so you're not really going to see too many fingerprints. But this concludes my comparison of the Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G 2023 versus the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra. Now clearly, these two phones are meant for completely different segments of the smartphone market, but I feel like if you're considering an S23 Ultra, you might be curious to see what you're losing out on if you want to save some money with the G Stylus 5G 2023. But then if you're someone interested in the G Stylus, you might be wondering what you're missing out on if you were to spend a bit more money for the Samsung. So hopefully you got some value out of this video. But if you liked it, give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care and have a great rest of your day.